disclosure.
Yes.
And to be honest, we shot enough for probably 3 episodes.
Yeah, I kind of thought so.
Yeah. And, the information was really sensitive. It was David and I sitting in the chair, we were feeling your emotions and pain. It was, so I think it was condensed into the one episode, because of, the nature of some of the trauma that you'd been through and that you're reporting. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and that, recovering those memories is a very traumatic thing, especially when you do not, when it comes in chunks and you don't have a way to make sense of it or assign it to an incident. Mm-hmm. You have PTSD with no real reason for the severity of it.
Exactly.
Is usually how it happens. So the first question is, when did you realize that you had been blank slated or mind wiped, and had your first memories come back? How did that happen?
Well, like I said in my presentation, I was talking with a friend about, and he said, he said that he noticed whenever my military background came up, I would kind of skate away to a different subject. I was unconsciously avoiding it. And so he sat me down one afternoon and he said, "Tell me about your military time. Is that okay?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." And I said I went into Lackland Air Force Base, 1979 in, I think, April. And then I went to Keesler Air Force Base for technical training school. And then I went home for a while on leave for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then I went to Nellis Air Force Base and started my duty station there. And I worked at Tonopah. And then about the time I said I worked at Tonopah, I realized that Tonopah was a big blank. It was just a big blank. And I couldn't remember anything, and I was like, how does that happen? Because I have a really good memory. I couldn't remember anything about working at Tonopah, and I know that I worked there for 3 or 4 months. And so it was, I just didn't know, but I did have a wave of nausea just sweep over me at the recognition that I couldn't remember what had happened during that time. It was really frightening to have this big black hole in my memory.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when the first memory started coming back, what was it like?
Well, I didn't get the memory back until the hypnosis session with Bud Hopkins. And I know people look askance at hypnosis, and I'm sure that there are ways to implant suggestions. But I have to say, Bud tried to actually lead me away from what I was recounting. He said, well, was it with this thing over here? Was it this thing over here? And I would stay right on what I was experiencing and just kept reporting it. And it was just staggering, the things that came out.
When you were reporting your memory, was it more like you were narrating a story, or did you have immediately emotional ties to those memories?
I had emotional ties. It was very emotional. And I remember laying there feeling rigid at what was coming out of me. Just rigid, like, what is this? What's coming out of me? And the emotional power of what I was feeling as I was recounting what had happened was unmistakable. It was, there was no way to really doubt it after this. I mean, after that session, that information just had a hold of me in such a way that I had to find out more. And I didn't even do any more hypnosis until 2003. So from 1994 to 2003, I just was trying to figure out what happened with the session with Bud.
You just had the one session?
Just the one, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was all I could handle.
Well, I guess you answered this question, if there were any signs of the memories coming back. Mm-hmm. I guess you mentioned that until you talked to your friend about your service, mm-hmm. you really didn't have any memories. You just saw a big chunk missing out of your memories.
Yeah, I didn't really have the memories then. But But I was very scared that I didn't have the memory.
Right.
It really scared the heck out of me.
Now, after the session that you had, the regression session, in the coming weeks afterwards, did you have more memories that were tied to the memories you recovered that were coming back? Or did you have to do a lot of, were they coming back automatically, or did you have to seek the memories?
Well, there have been flashbacks.
Yeah.
And, not associated with hypnosis. Like, for instance, I used to have really bad allergies, like really severe, springtime hay fever type of allergies, where I would have to sleep sitting up just to be able to breathe at all. And the congestion here would get so bad that not just the sinuses were congested in lockdown, but it was almost like the capillaries under the skin in this area were also warmed. And that warming sensation over my nose and mouth, for some reason, that just made me panic. And the memories that have come out of that were not from hypnosis were of that blonde security guard I wrote about in my book, smothering me. He would do this and smother me until I lost consciousness. And I didn't know if I was ever going to wake up. But it's come back like a piece at a time from the flashbacks. And then, just kind of realizing, and I'm still realizing things about it today, but I'd rather not talk about them because they're pretty ugly.
I would imagine.
Yeah. I guess it made sense. It helped to make sense of my life before remembering anything, of all the stuff that I didn't realize was PTSD at the time. But I would have anxiety, and I'd have, I'd get angry about things, and and I couldn't really pin it down. And it nearly drove me to suicide about age 33, because I was living with anxiety at that point that I didn't know how to deal with, and I thought, I'm making my family miserable. I'm miserable. There really isn't any good to this existence. And so I actually planned to do it. And then when I sat down and thought about it, thought the whole thing of suicide through, I realized I couldn't go through with it because spiritually, it's a really bad choice.
Well, is this after the memories returned?
No, this was before.
Okay.
This was before the memories came back. But I feel like I was guided to recovering the memories in one form or another, because when I decided not to commit suicide that day at age 33, I committed myself to facing whatever I needed to face to heal. And when you make that kind of a commitment to yourself, the universe starts to line up the people, places, and situations to help you accomplish your goal, which at that point was to heal.
After these memories, after the regression therapy session and the memories returned, how did you begin to integrate that information into your reality?
Well, it was pretty tough. For a while, I just went through life, like I said, looking over my shoulder, because I thought, if somebody didn't want me to remember this, if they did some kind of memory wipe on me and they didn't want me to remember this, they may have been monitoring me to see if I would ever remember anything. And so I became kind of paranoid, looking over my shoulder all the time. I remember one time sitting down with crypto researcher John Rhodes at Denny's. And I remember talking to him and looking over my shoulder all the time and looking at other people sitting at other tables to see if they were listening to me or looking at me in any way. I mean, I was really pretty jumpy for a while.
Yeah, I remember when I first started shooting Cosmic Disclosure, I went through a very similar thing. I mean, I would actually worry that at some point I was going to be picked up, mind wiped, and then put back. That would keep me from reporting any further information and would probably be a way to discredit me. So that was one of the things I was really worried about. I thought that they were going to re-abduct me, do a mind wipe, and then put me back and set me up for ridicule. Fortunately, that never happened. They didn't, the Air Force, when they picked me up the first few times to do the chemical interrogations, they would do I guess, a low-level mind wipe.
Yeah.
So did you share these memories with family and friends, or did you do what most people do? You just kind of buried it and dealt with it on your own?
Yeah, mostly I buried it and dealt with it on my own. Some of it I just couldn't speak about to certain people, certain people that are really mainstream. And that kind of stuff is pretty crazy making to them. So I just kept quiet about it until I found safe people to talk to. And what I did...
People like these.
Yeah, people like this. And
I think that's why we're all coming together.
Yeah. But I would go to in Las Vegas, Nevada, there was a lot going on in that time. And so I went to every talk, every lecture, everything I could where something might come to me that would explain what the heck happened to me out there and why. And so in going to those events is when I met people like Misha Johnston and other people that really helped me to try to start piecing together this fractured part of my life.
I know something similar happened to me, but when your book came out, was the cat kind of out of the bag to your family? Did they find out about it immediately?
Pretty much. My family doesn't pay a lot of attention to it. It's kind of beyond them, is what they would say. And, because my father passed away in 1976, so he didn't ever get involved with it. But, I did speak about it to my mother a little bit after I'd gone public, because it felt like, it's public anyway, she's going to hear something probably. And I did do a interview in shadow, supposedly anonymously, in the Dreamland documentary that came out in 1996. But they didn't hide my identity very well at all. And I was both furious and terrified that they hid my identity so badly, because anybody that knew it was me knew that was me on the screen. And I had people coming up to me at that time, and then when they re-aired the documentary other times, people would come up and say, "Was that you on that UFO show?" And I'd have to say, "Yeah, it was,"
Yeah, I had a similar situation where I was sort of outed and I wasn't ready, and that's not a good thing. One of the things that a few of my family members have found out, I guess, what I'm doing now. I think everyone knows, but they don't want to acknowledge it or talk to me about it. They don't want the uncomfortable conversations to come up. But the one person that did talk to me, and I won't say who it was, called me up and they said, "I've seen all of the stuff you're talking about on the internet, about aliens and inner Earth. I don't know if I want that around my house because I'm a Christian."
Yeah.
So, and of course I've gotten a few of the, they're worried about my soul and all these other things. So.
Well indoctrinated.
Yeah. Yeah. So coming out and reporting this information, that's something you think about.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought long and hard about how it was going to affect my immediate family, my children, how they were going to get locked into that persona, children of the contactee or, the blue chicken cult leader or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I thought about it long and hard. Now, I definitely knew, my grandfather was a minister. I actually went to school to be a minister for a little while. I knew that it was going to be a major shock to my family. And as I said on Cosmic Disclosure, I think, I expected them to do an intervention to invite me over for Thanksgiving, and then, there'd be a pastor, one or two psychiatrists, 8-foot-tall blue birds. That's a pretty interesting thing for a psychiatrist. And for them to sit me down and have an intervention, that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
I think this information is so bizarre for them, they just don't even want to approach it. It's so much out of their reality bubble.
Yeah.
So, that was a major step. Did you really think about how your family would react, or was it just, this was a mission, you had to write the book for your own
clear of their dysfunction to get myself together.
Yeah, you have to pull yourself out of that energy to be able to recover from it.
Right. And so I felt kind of like a free agent after a while, that I could pretty much do what I needed to do. But during the Solara 1111 thing, I had to do a meditation for my star name. And I was born Janet Marie Isley. And then the name I got during this Solara event was Niara Turela. It was real interesting how it came. It sounded like little bells that I heard in my inner ear that finally formed into the words Niara Turela. And I made it a legal change. And then later on, I was glad that I made the legal change of my name, because then I thought, if I do go public with this stuff, at least I'm not wearing the same name that I had with my family of origin.
Yeah, I tried to use a little bit of a pseudonym too for a while, but it didn't work for very long.
It's all in my book. I've tried to be as transparent as possible in my book.
So now, all of a sudden, after regression therapy, you have all these extremely traumatic memories.
Yeah.
How did you begin to process that pain and energy? Was it through writing your book, or did you have a much more personal way of beginning to deal with those traumas?
Well, I guess the first thing I did was I just let myself feel it, because really I couldn't feel anything else. I had a hypnosis, 2 more long hypnosis sessions with someone in 2003, and after I got back home from those, I remember pretty much just sitting on my sofa for a month with my arms up around my knees, kind of rocking back and forth, thinking, oh my God. And I just would feel this panic just welling up in me, because the images in my head were me. This was happening to me. And it was just horrific. You know, like the things that happened on the moon, you know, not being allowed to sleep, which is part of a mind control technique, and being worked very hard during the day, and then being used at night for sex. You know, pretty nasty.
Were you able to find a therapist to help you through this, or a trusted friend? Because dealing with these memories, especially when they're memories that you've recovered, it's, I guess, anyone that has had trauma that they've put out of their lives and they've lost the memories tied to those, it's amazing how much energy and how much emotion are tied to these memories. When you revisit the memories now, over time, has that energy reduced any? Has there been that type of healing?
It has, except when new things come out. And there have been some new things that have come out over the last 2 or 3 months that I'm having difficulty with, but I'm coming to grips with it. I thought, well, I've come to grips with so much, I can come to grips with this too. Basically, I didn't want to approach a therapist